The moment that breaks a narcissist is usually not the breakup. It is not the threat. It is not even the final cold message. It is the second you do something they never prepared for. You stay calm. You do not beg. You do not chase. You do not fall apart in front of them. You let their words land, and then you let them live with those words. That is the part they cannot process, because in their mind, this was supposed to end with your panic, your tears, your confusion, your desperate need to pull them back. Instead, they get silence, they get self-control, they get a version of you that no longer performs pain to prove love, and that changes everything. If you have ever wondered why some people come back only after you finally stop caring, stay with me, because this is where the real shift begins. What looks quiet on the outside can shake them more than any argument ever could. And what happens next says everything about the game they were really playing the whole time. One of the strongest and most revealing moments in any narcissistic dynamic happens when they make a dramatic choice to leave and fully expect you to run after them. In many of these relationships, the breakup is not really about ending things with honesty or closure. It is often about setting a scene where they become the center of your emotional world one more time. They expect questions, they expect heartbreak, they expect long messages, tears, promises, bargaining, and emotional chaos. In their inner script, your reaction is supposed to confirm something they deeply need to believe, that they matter more than your peace, that they can still control the emotional weather of your life, and that their absence is powerful enough to make you collapse. For many narcissistic people, making a final decision is less about walking away and more about pulling attention toward themselves at the exact moment they want it most. They picture the whole thing in advance. They imagine you trying to understand, trying to fix it, trying to hold on. And those reactions do not just feel satisfying to them. They feel like proof that they still have importance, proof that your world still turns around them. That expectation usually does not come from nowhere. It is built over time through repeated cycles, conflict, distance, confusion, then reunion. They pull away and you move closer. They go cold and you work harder. They threaten to leave and you try to save the relationship. After enough repetitions, they stop seeing this as a pattern and start seeing it as a rule. In their mind, they disturb the bond and you restore it. That becomes the emotional contract, even if nobody ever says it out loud. What makes this moment so revealing is how certain they usually are that the pattern will repeat. When they say they are done, when they deliver the ultimatum, when they turn their back and wait, there is often an invisible pause built into that moment. They may watch your face, they may slow down before leaving, they may say something extra sharp just to increase the emotional pressure. That pause matters. It is the space where they expect confirmation. They are waiting for the plea, the protest, the panic, the sign that their power is still intact. But when that reaction never comes, the script they trusted begins to fall apart right in front of them. And for a narcissist, that can feel deeply unsettling. Instead of feeling powerful, they are met with something they did not plan for: silence, composure, and acceptance. They expected to feel larger. Instead, they feel uncertain. They thought their role in your life was so central that you would not be able to let them go without a fight. When you prove otherwise, you do more than surprise them. You disrupt the story they built about themselves. Suddenly the questions begin, even if they never say them out loud. Why did you not chase? Why did you not argue? Why did you not try harder? These are usually not signs of deep self-awareness. More often, they are signs that their usual methods of emotional control did not work the way they expected. Narcissistic patterns depend heavily on predictable reactions. They push, you respond. They withdraw, you pursue. But when that chain breaks, they are forced into a kind of uncertainty they do not handle well. And if you listen closely, this is the point where the whole dynamic starts changing. This is where your calm becomes louder than all the old drama. Another part of this is attention. For a narcissist, attention often works like emotional fuel. When they make a big decision and you respond with strong emotion, that reaction feeds something inside them. It tells them they are still central, still impactful, still able to stir your heart, shake your mind, and control the energy in the room even after saying they are done. But when you accept their decision without turning it into a performance, you take away the very thing they were counting on. You remove the validation, you remove the applause, you remove the emotional spotlight, and in its place, they are left with the raw consequences of their own words. That is what makes calm acceptance so powerful. It does not just let them leave, it makes them live with what they chose without the bonus reward of watching you break. For someone whose self-esteem depends on outside reactions, this can feel very destabilizing. They may not admit that. They may act indifferent. They may even look colder than before. But internally, something is off. The exit did not feel the way they expected it to feel. It did not produce the emotional confirmation they were looking for. And that matters because refusing to chase does not mean you feel nothing. It means you are finally choosing dignity over the cycle. It means you understand that your emotional balance matters more than proving your love to someone who keeps testing it. It means you stop handing over your nervous system every time they create tension. That shift is not loud. It is not dramatic. But it is life-changing. And if you have ever felt guilty for staying calm, hear this clearly. Calm is not weakness. Calm is often the first sign that the manipulation is losing access to you. Narcissistic relationships often run on a hidden structure of power. It is not always obvious in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like passion. Sometimes it looks like intensity. Sometimes it looks like one person just having a strong personality. But under the surface, there is often a quiet system being built where one person becomes the emotional center and the other becomes the emotional responder. The narcissist decides when there is closeness and when there is distance. They decide when tension begins and when peace returns. They create confusion and then they become the person you are expected to win back. Over time, this trains you to react in ways that keep them in the stronger position. When they pull away, you move closer. When they criticize, you defend yourself. When they threaten to leave, you try harder to make things work. This repeated pattern becomes a script that both people start following without even realizing it. And as long as that script continues, the narcissist feels powerful, important, and emotionally central. But the moment you calmly accept their final decision, that entire system starts to crack. Because control is built on reaction. If they push a button and you respond the way they predicted, they feel in charge. But if they push the same button and nothing happens, the illusion weakens. Your stillness becomes a boundary they cannot easily move. Your silence becomes proof that the old controls are failing, and that is hard for them to understand at first. They may mistake your calm for not caring. They may tell themselves you were never invested. They may act as if your composure proves they were right to leave, but with time, if you remain steady, another meaning starts to emerge. Your acceptance was real. You were not playing hard to get. You were not creating a scene in reverse. You were simply done participating in a cycle that no longer served your peace. That realization can disturb them more than people understand, because narcissistic identity often depends on influence. They need to feel that they matter deeply in the emotional lives of others, not in a healthy mutual way, but in a way that keeps them feeling important, unforgettable, and hard to replace. So when their choices no longer create intense reactions, something inside them starts wobbling. In many cases, this is when they begin testing the waters, not always in obvious ways. Sometimes the attempts are small, almost casual, a short message, a random check-in. A memory brought up out of nowhere, a soft reaction to something you post, maybe even a tiny criticism designed to see if you still defend yourself the way you used to. These moves may look harmless on the surface, but often they are trying to answer one quiet question. Do I still have access? Do I still matter here? Can I still pull a reaction out of you if I want one? This is why consistency matters so much after you accept their decision. Because if your calm disappears the moment they return with a little warmth, a little nostalgia, or a little confusion, the old script can restart fast. They may not even need a big opening, just one emotional crack, just one familiar response, just one sign that the door is still emotionally unlocked. But when you stay grounded, when you do not rush to explain yourself, when you do not hand them immediate emotional access, something new happens. They meet a boundary that does not move. And boundaries like that are powerful because they are not loud. They do not have to shout. They do not have to threaten. They just remain. They say, without saying, your decision was yours, and now the consequences are yours too. My peace is not available for negotiation anymore. That is a very different message from anger. It is stronger. It is cleaner. And for someone used to emotional leverage, it can feel like losing the very language they once used to control the relationship. One of the most disorienting things for a narcissist is when the person they expected to stay emotionally hooked becomes calm, clear, and harder to reach. In these dynamics, emotion is often treated like currency. Your sadness means they still matter. Your anger means they still matter. Your pleading means they matter even more. Even your confusion can feed the bond because it keeps your focus on them. But when that emotional stream dries up, when you stop making them the center of your inner world, they are forced to face something they rarely want to face: the possibility that they are no longer emotionally dominant in the space they once controlled. That can trigger another process in the background. They start rewriting the story. For many narcissistic people, protecting the ego is not optional, it is constant. Their identity depends on feeling right, superior, justified, and in control. So when reality does not support that image, especially when you accept their decision with dignity and keep moving, they often reshape the past to protect how they see themselves. They create a version where they were wiser, stronger, clearer, and more justified all along. In this new version, they were the one who saw the truth first. They were the one who recognized the flaws. They were the one who walked away from something beneath them. This is not always a fully conscious lie. Sometimes it works more like a defense mechanism. Shame and vulnerability sit closer to the surface than they want anyone to know. So when something challenges their sense of importance, the mind rushes to repair the damage. If you did not chase, they may decide you never cared. If you stayed calm, they may call you cold. If you moved on, they may tell themselves you were replaceable all along. Notice what is happening there. They are not just remembering the past. They are editing it so they can survive it. That rewriting can become even stronger after the relationship ends. Small problems from the past may suddenly become giant proof that the relationship was always doomed. Tiny disagreements may get magnified into major moral failings. Moments where you were tired, confused, or hurt may be retold as evidence that you were impossible to love, impossible to satisfy, or impossible to trust. In some cases, they take this revised story to other people, friends, family, new partners, anyone who can reflect back the version of reality they now need. In those retellings, they may describe themselves as patient, generous, deeply misunderstood, or unfairly burdened. They may paint the breakup as a mature decision they had no choice but to make. And very often, the strongest part of your response, your calm acceptance, disappears completely from the story. Why? Because your dignity does not serve the image they are trying to protect. Your silence does not give them enough drama to work with. Your refusal to argue does not offer the conflict they need to stand on. So they create another version where their ego remains untouched. But there is something important hidden inside all that rewriting. The more aggressively they reshape the story, the more it often reveals that reality did not land the way they expected. If they truly felt secure in what happened, they would not need to polish the narrative so hard. The intensity of the revision often points to the depth of the discomfort, and this is where your silence becomes even more powerful. When you do not chase them into debates about the past, when you do not rush to correct every lie, when you do not fight to control how they tell the story, you step out of the old stage entirely. That may feel unfair at times. It may feel like they get to say whatever they want. But in a deeper sense, it frees you, because now your healing is no longer tied to being understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. That is a different kind of power. And if this part hits hard, stay with me, because what happens later is often even more revealing. Much later, after the dust settles, after the silence stretches, after you rebuild parts of yourself they thought would stay broken, a surprising phase often begins. They try to return, not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes it is subtle, quiet, almost forgettable if you do not know what you are looking at. A simple, "How have you been?" A reaction to something online, a random memory dropped into your inbox, a question they could have answered without you. On the surface, it can look innocent, even sweet. Sometimes it can look like regret. But very often, underneath that contact is not deep love. It is curiosity mixed with relevance. They begin to notice something they did not expect: your continued absence, your peace, your independence, the fact that life did not freeze without them. At first, many narcissistic people assume they still have time. They think you will reach out eventually. They think you will miss them loudly. They think the old emotional bridge is still standing, waiting for them to cross back whenever they feel like it. But when no message comes, when no chase begins, when no emotional signal arrives from your side, silence starts saying something louder than words ever could. It says the cycle may actually be over. And that is hard for them to process because many of these relationships are built on repetition. Break up, reconnect, apologize, repeat, leave, return, reset the bond. Each reunion teaches them they can create damage and still regain access later. So when you break the pattern for real, When you do not reopen the emotional door just because they knock softly, the meaning lands slowly but heavily. Their influence may have ended, not just paused, ended. And for someone who relied on that influence to feel important, this can be deeply unsettling. This is why the return often begins as a test rather than a confession. They want to see whether the old version of you is still there, the version that answered quickly, the version that felt relief just hearing from them, the version that treated a small sign of attention like a lifeline. They may come in gently. They may sound softer than before. They may even seem reflective. But the deeper question underneath is usually simple. Is the emotional door still open? Because if it is, then the old structure can often be rebuilt. Maybe not exactly the same way. Maybe with a new mask, a kinder tone, a slower pace, but still built on the same foundation, access, reaction, control. This is where your response matters more than ever. If you answer from loneliness, from nostalgia, from the hope that this time they finally understand, the old cycle can restart before you even realize it. And that does not mean you are weak. It means old bonds can wake up fast when they are touched in familiar places. But if you stay rooted in the clarity you earned, if you remember why peace felt so strange at first and then so necessary, you can meet the return differently. You do not have to be cruel. You do not have to be dramatic. You do not have to prove anything. You simply do not give away emotional access just because they showed up. When that happens, something becomes very clear to them. Your acceptance was not temporary. Your silence was not a trick. Your distance was not a game meant to make them come back harder. It was real healing, real movement, real detachment. And that is often the moment they finally feel what they never expected to feel from you, a life that no longer revolves around them. Let that sink in for a second, because this is where the balance truly changes. What makes your acceptance so powerful is not just what it does to them, it is what it restores in you. During a narcissistic relationship, your sense of self can slowly get trained out of its natural rhythm. You start over-explaining, overthinking, monitoring moods, predicting reactions, managing tension before it explodes, trying to find the right words, the right tone, the right timing, the right amount of care to keep the connection from tipping into chaos again. Little by little, your inner life begins to organize itself around someone else's instability. That is why accepting their final decision is not passive. It is active recovery. It is the moment you stop volunteering for emotional labor that was never truly yours. It is the moment you stop treating their confusion as your emergency. It is the moment you let responsibility return to the person who created the decision in the first place. That matters deeply. Because the old pattern survives only when you keep carrying both sides of the relationship in your own nervous system. The second you put down what was never yours to hold, your body starts learning a new truth. You do not have to chase closure. You do not have to prove your loyalty by enduring confusion. You do not have to translate your pain into language they respect. You do not have to keep auditioning for basic care. Acceptance interrupts all of that. It tells your mind, this stops here. It tells your heart, we are not dying, we are exiting. And yes, there may still be sadness, there may still be love, grief, memory, and shock, but there is also space now. Space where your thoughts are not constantly bent around their next move. Space where your peace is allowed to exist without permission. Space where your identity starts returning to you in pieces that feel stronger because you had to fight so hard to get them back. And here is something many people do not realize until much later. The narcissist often mistakes your old pain for proof of deep control, when in reality, it was often proof of your depth, your empathy, your hope, your willingness to believe things could get better. They confuse your effort with their power. They confuse your attachment with their superiority. They confuse your patience with permission. That is why your calm ending hits so differently. Because now, they are no longer watching a wounded person trying to save the bond. They are watching someone reclaim the meaning of their own care. Your kindness is no longer available as a tool. Your loyalty is no longer being spent in a place that drains it. Your attention is no longer handed over just because someone demands it with distance, threat, or confusion. And this can create a strange discomfort in them. They may try to provoke one last argument. They may want a final explanation. They may act offended that you became distant after they were the one who left. They may try to pull guilt out of the situation and hand it back to you, but underneath all of that is the same hard truth. Your emotional independence removed the reward from the old pattern. There is no more easy fuel, no more guaranteed reaction, no more automatic return to the cycle. And if they do keep testing you, remember this. Every calm non-reaction is not you being cold. It is you protecting what you rebuilt. Every boundary is not hostility. It is structure. Every moment you refuse to step back into confusion is another piece of freedom becoming permanent. If you have been waiting for some big dramatic sign that you finally healed, sometimes this is it. You no longer need to explain why you are choosing peace. You just choose it, again and again, quietly, clearly. And that quiet choice starts changing your whole life. The deeper truth is that narcissistic dynamics survive on participation. They need your engagement, your defense, your hope, your anger, your need to be seen correctly. When you stop offering those things in the same old way, the entire machine loses momentum. That does not mean they suddenly become self-aware. It does not mean they fully understand the harm. And it does not guarantee they will stop trying. But it does mean something very real has changed. The script cannot keep running without both actors. And once you step out of it, once you stop reading the lines they assign to you, the whole structure becomes harder for them to maintain. They may still keep their version of the story. They may still tell themselves they won. They may still act unbothered. Let them. Because the real shift is not happening in their words. It is happening in your life. It is happening in the way your mornings start to feel lighter, in the way your body stops bracing for the next emotional storm, in the way your mind gets quieter when you no longer need to decode every mixed signal, in the way you begin making decisions without checking whether they will like, reject, punish, or ignore them. This is what acceptance gives back, not just distance from the person, but distance from the entire emotional system that kept you trapped inside reaction. And the more you protect that distance, the more obvious it becomes that what they once held was never true power. It was access, access to your attention, access to your empathy, access to your fear of losing them. Once that access closes, their imagined control starts looking very small. That is why the calm ending matters so much. It is not dramatic enough for movies, but it is powerful enough to change a life. And if you are at that stage now, if you are somewhere between missing them and finally seeing clearly, remember this: peace often feels unfamiliar before it feels safe. Do not mistake unfamiliar peace for the urge to go back.